All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good buddy Chris Faraone. Chris is an independent journalist and the news editor at Dig Boston. He's the author of several books, including His Honoroo, I Killed Andrew Breitbart, and 99 Nights with the 99%, all of which you can find at righttopower.net. You can also follow him on Twitter at Faraone. Chris, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Oh, I love this show.
Thanks, buddy. So, Chris, you actually recently published, you published the first couple of chapters of a new investigative series at Medium on the militarized evictions that happened in the state of Oregon. I guess let's begin. Tell me, how did you actually come about this story?
Yeah, this is totally left field, left side of the country for me. Totally something different. I'm a Boston-based reporter, originally from New York. So, it actually started with, well, I guess for a while, I've been looking for what they call a zombie county, is often called, which is basically a municipality or a county or something of that nature that has either zero or limited law enforcement. And this has happened in the South with the slumping economy, places in Texas that I've read about. But I was really looking for one to write about. And this is just kind of in the back of my head. So that's for a while. And randomly, earlier this year, or last year, in about April, an old friend called and said that his parents had been evicted from their home of almost 30 years by a SWAT team in southern Oregon, southwest Oregon. And it started from there. I started investigating. And I found an incredibly strange situation, one that, as a reporter, really caught my interest.
Well, let's dig into that, because I mean, in the intro part of this, in your intro post, you kind of set the scene for why things are the way they are in Oregon, and how essentially a lot of these old lumber towns have sort of collapsed. So set a little bit give us the setting, and then we'll dig into some of the individual cases.
Yeah, happily. So this, they're called the O and C counties. That's Oregon and California, and they're on the West Coast. One or two counties in mostly from the Pacific Ocean. Some go right up to the ocean, and these were counties that for a century were logged, and there was mining, by the way. There was especially in the 19th century, but basically this was that was the gold rush in Oregon. It was this is logging country, particularly this part of Oregon. They call it old growth timber. Those are the big trees that have been cut, getting cut down for generations. They call it, in some cases, clear cut, which is when you see the entire side of the mountain cut down. This has been a back and forth, but starting in the 80s and then the 90s, restrictions started to be put on these federal forests. You see, Josephine County, where I'm reporting out of, I believe is about up to like 70% of that county is a federal forest, and all of the timber cut on those lands went to the people through tax subsidies, essentially. So people in Josephine County have never really paid very much property tax. They have one of the lowest property taxes in the state, and they've always had, sufficient, adequate police and trash where that's applicable, and things of that sort. Services that I guess that they certainly were taking for granted, in my opinion. This is not to spite the people there. It's been a tough ride for them, but it's been a war between the logging industry and environmentalists to some extent. And in 2012, a lot of that really crashed. A lot of those federal forests closed. And as such, the sheriff's department was cut by more than 2/3. And we're kind of left with the situation that we have here, which is that basic services, there aren't even sheriff's patrols on the weekends in a lot of areas of Josephine County. And that's resulted in certainly an increase in property theft, property crime, and even some, violent crimes of wild natures, and people calling 911 and being told that there's no one that can help them.
I mean, again, like you and I, living in a kind of a bigger city, both of us, and we've talked about this before, and have looked at riot cops and stuff, taking down peaceful protesters and whatnot. But there is definitely an area where, like, if something really bad is happening, you should be able to call, you'd hope to be able to call a cop if, like, you're being assaulted and stuff and you actually need help. That's, like, really what you really do need police for. And this is something that in this area, it's so decimated by not actually having industry there anymore that it actually, they aren't even able to afford even basic police services for the most part.
Right. When I was out there for my first trip, and there was a kid who was the school went on lockdown. Actually, the high school went on lockdown actually twice while I was there. There are a lot of threats and stuff, and so one kid had been there with a knife, and I actually drove out to the scene, and they had him cuffed and everything. And it turned out that they didn't even have a juvenile pen in a juvenile jail that put this kid in, because the juvenile jail has been closed in Grants Pass, which is the county seat. So they had to bring him over to the county next door. And, a lot of people have had to be let out of the county jail as well. So this is it's always kind of, especially like you said, people like myself who often report on the overuse of police force and hyper police force. This is a new kind of situation where in some cases there's just woefully inadequate police presence, and that it really affects the everyday citizens who live there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm talking to my friend Chris Faraone. You can find his work at righttopower.net, on Twitter at Faraone. Well, so the first installment, beyond the intro, you actually tell the story of a woman named Jet Havens, and how she was evicted. So tell us all about Jet.
Well, Jet was actually not. Jet was just a neighbor. Jet wasn't evicted. It was her neighbor.
Tom and Melinda Roach was evicted?
Right.
Okay, I had the names wrong.
Melinda Starba and Tom Roach, and they're longtime partners, and they've been living in Oregon. Jet and her son Vic are their neighbors. And they're in the story because they were not so pleasantly woken up by a SWAT team one day last April, and they had the good thinking to go out and record the situation, what was going on. And this was, we were 2 seconds ago we were talking about how there are diminished resources in this county, and now we are talking about the use of excessive, in my opinion, SWAT force. So in this case, there was one of those Lenco tanks, the Bearcat urban tanks, assault vehicles that we've seen, the armored vehicles in Ferguson and such. There was a huge wagon. There were police cruisers. There was a dually, one of those big pickup trucks with a battering ram on the front. And this was all for an eviction of Tom Roach and Melinda Starba out in Oregon. And this is the story that really drew me in. And just the way that I'm presenting this series, it's weekly. It's on medium.com, and we're doing it that way because this is a developing story. I've been covering it for almost a year, but every tree I look behind, there's something else going on.